St. John wanted to do the Summer Faith series, and this particular series is about a leap of faith, or the journey to that leap. And Dawn approached me and asked my story, so I'm going to go ahead and share my story. I think a lot of people know who I am by my name and hanging out with the Brock girls, but they don't know my true story. My name is Steve McCartney. A lot of people might know me as Brenda Brock's husband. We met probably 6.5 years ago, and didn't like each other at first, but then we started to like each other, and we ended up married and together. I was originally born in Washington, Pennsylvania. I'm from 84, Pennsylvania, which is a small town just south of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Grew up in a very poor family. We didn't have a lot. My dad was a hard-working carpenter. My stepdad, my real dad, was a truck driver. My mom and dad got divorced when I was 2 years old. I'm the youngest of 6, so I have 3 older brothers and 2 older sisters, and then I'm the youngest of that family, the McCartney family clan. Like I said, my mom remarried when I was 7. She divorced when I was 2. She remarried when I was 7. And my stepdad, Frank, is a hard-working carpenter, really good carpenter, but not real. He quit school in 8th grade to work for his dad, who had a house building business, and they were also farmers. And he's a hard-working guy, but not real educated. But he made $10 an hour my whole life until he retired a few years ago. And his claim to fame is he built Mario Lemieux's house, famous Pittsburgh Penguin. And back in the 90s, he built his house in Pittsburgh. Big house, $1 million house. So anyway, I grew up the youngest of 6, and with that comes a lot of problems. I think by the time I was born, actually my mother, after she had my sisters, she decided to have her tubes cut and tied. She didn't want to have any more children. She didn't want to have the 5 she had. And she went to the doctor, had her tubes cut and tied so she couldn't have any more children, and I guess, I don't know, 10, 12 months later, she was pregnant and had Stephen, and named me Stephen, and here I am. So, because she didn't want to have children, it was kind of a rough place to be as a young kid. I tell the story, and a lot of people don't understand or think that this could be true, but at 5 years old, I could leave and go wherever I wanted for the weekend. I could just disappear. Nobody looked for me. Nobody asked where I was. Nobody said, "Hey, where's that little kid that used to run around here?" Because she was done by the time she got to the 6th child. My stepdad, if he had some work to do, he would find me to help work, but that was when I was 7 and beyond. You know, I always helped him work and learned how to work hard for my stepdad. But we grew up poor. We always had food to eat because we always gardened, and we always did the half of a hog and half of a cow, and so we always had food. But as far as clothing and fitting in and stuff, it was tough. You know, when you're a kid in school, my daughters and then Brenda's daughters have whatever they want when they want it, and they never have to worry about how they look at school. But growing up, I struggled with that, so self-esteem was a big hit for me. I fell into, through grade school, I did great, straight A's, went to school every day, never missed a day of school. And then middle school happened, and peer pressure.
Was there faith in your family when you were young?
No, yeah, I didn't tell that story. My mother used to ship all of us off with the neighbors who were very faith-based. To tell you the truth, I don't know what church we even went to, but she would ship us off every Sunday, and they were trying to help, and they were trying to be good missionaries, and they would take whatever kids wanted to go, and we'd pile in their car and go to the church up on the hill. And I got kicked out at age 6. I struggled with the stories, and I always say it. I was always trying to dam up the creek in the back to make a big water area so we could go fishing and stuff, and I never could stop the water flow. So the whole Red Sea parting, I struggled with the stories and how they were taught to us, and I basically got kicked out. The pastors or the reverends or whoever it was in that particular denomination of church didn't like me much because I questioned faith and I struggled. So they kicked me out, so I didn't go to church. My parents are by the Irish, English, and Scottish heritage. There's Roman Catholic, but they really never followed the Roman Catholic beliefs, or they didn't go to church regularly. ever, that I remember, ever, until now. My parents are retired and living in a different state, my stepdad and my mom, and they go to church, the local church. I don't even think it's not Roman Catholic, that's for sure. It's just a small, I think, Baptist church or whatever. They go there every Sunday, and they're friends with everybody. But when I was growing up, there was no faith, and quite frankly, I struggled with faith and believing, just because of the things that I had lived through and gone through, and I think I told you the story before. I've never understood why children would suffer in a God-based or a God-created society. I hear Jen question faith sometimes in her sermons, and she comes to points, and I think everybody does. Everybody has those moments where they struggle, and I didn't get it, how kids, innocent children, children of God could suffer, and that's where my biggest lack of belief came from. Is I can see a 30-something-year-old person that did bad things suffering. I can see punishment, but I struggled with the children and how children starved and how children were mistreated. And I tell the story of, there was a girl in our neighborhood who wanted to get a guy to marry her, and she went ahead and got pregnant intentionally and had the baby. And she thought that this guy would marry her, and he had 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 other children in town. The other girls, he was just a dog. I mean, he was the guy that needed punished as far as faith goes. And I watched that little boy, Alan, and I was only, I guess, 15, 16 when he was 1, 2, and she just abused him because she saw him, his father in him. And that poor little guy was the cutest, smartest, nicest little kid, and it just tore me up. I didn't understand it. Why would you have a child that had to deal with that if there was a God, if there was a being? So that was my main, I joined the military. I tell the story. I graduated high school. There was never any thought of college for me, even though I was a smart kid. I got in a lot of trouble through middle school and high school. I got stabbed in the face because I was in the wrong place at the wrong time and almost died. Almost bled out. I saw a really good friend of mine shot to death by the police in Pittsburgh when I was a kid. I've seen people commit suicide. I fell into the wrong crowd because there was no parental support. There was no support at the school. It was a rough time. I mean, it was a rough childhood, So I really had I struggled battling peer pressure. So I try to teach my girls and Brenda's girls to avoid peer pressure at all costs and do your own thing and do the right thing. But I struggled with it, and the whole lack of self-confidence is what leads to that. So I try to teach the girls to be confident and strong. Brenda might do the same as well. So I got to a point, I graduated high school. I made it. I graduated when I was supposed to. In 1984, I graduated high school in Canamac High School. Started working at Napa, driving a pickup truck. And 2 of my older brothers, had been in the Navy. And I kind of remember the postcards from Hawaii and from Australia and Japan and all these cool places, Alaska. And, and I kind of, in the back of my mind, I thought about the military, but I never really seriously thought about it because it's a commitment. It's a huge commitment. And then I got to a point where I delivered auto parts to a guy I knew. He was 25 years old. I was 19. I'd been out of high school almost a year. And I was living with mom and dad and mom and stepdad. And he says, hey, you want to go meet some women? And I'm like, I'm a 19-year-old guy. He's 25. I'm like, yeah, I want to go meet some women. He goes, I'm going up to the high school. And I try to keep the story PG-13 here, but I tried to picture the attractive teachers up at the high school. There were several of them, but one of them we thought was a lesbian, and so she didn't like guys, men, and the other one just got married and had a baby, and it's like, as a 19-year-old guy, a woman with a baby didn't, wasn't, Well, then I said, there are no women up at the high school. He goes, the track team's practicing, the tennis team's practicing, the cross-country team's practicing, and I went, oh my gosh, if I stay in Southwest Pennsylvania, I'm going to become a pedophile. That's what's going to occur to me. I kid you not, that night, I got off work at 5 p.m. At 5:15 p.m., that was in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania. You can Google map it. I was in Washington by 5:15, sitting in front of a recruiter for the U.S. Navy, and I signed up for 6 years. I signed up for the longest enlistment I could sign up for to get out of Southwest Pennsylvania as fast as I could because I did not want to picture 60-year-old girls as women when I was 19 years old. They were little girls to me, and I wanted to keep it that way. So I joined, and it was a funny story because the recruiter, he didn't know what to do, because they usually battle and fight and have to sell a deal to someone. And I walked in and said, I want the longest enlistment I can have, and I want to leave now. And he said, you can't leave now. Do you want McDonald's? Do you want a sticker? Do you want a... No, I don't want a coffee cup. I want to join and get the heck out of here. I gotta go. And he said, okay. And I signed all the papers that night. That was April 27th, 1985. I remember the date. And I left as soon as I could, after I took my physical and all my tests and everything. I left June 3rd of 1985 for San Diego, California. I went to boot camp in San Diego and joined the military, and I basically in 6 years I learned how to operate power plants. And besides the skill set to operate power plants in the Navy, I learned that you could become whoever you wanted to be once you get away from the toxic environment you're in. You can be the person you want to be. So I joined the Navy, did 6 years. I was stationed out of Mayport, Florida for 2 ships. And I sailed to the Persian Gulf twice in combat, both times. Once in 1987 to replace the USS Stark in the Persian Gulf, and once in 1989. Right after I got married to my first wife, I was 12 days later, I went to the Persian Gulf for 6 months. So I got married in 1989 to my first wife. She already had a daughter, 3 years old. I became stepdad. Kind of knew the rub because I was a stepson, and knew how I wanted to be perceived as one. And as soon as we got married, the relationship became abusive, and it wasn't abusive from my end, from the guy's end, which is stereotypical. It was abusive the other way. My first wife's dad was an alcoholic, a functioning alcoholic. He worked for ComEd and functioned, but he had to drink. And he married a woman from Japan so that he could keep her in the back and treat her as a second-class citizen and do whatever he wanted. And so he did a lot of bad things in her childhood, and she wanted to make sure I didn't do those bad things. So she really, to work on her own self-esteem, she put me down a lot. And there was physical abuse, probably almost monthly, I would say. In the 21-year marriage, we stayed married 21 years, knew each other 3 months, got married, and stayed married 21 years. And I did it for all the same. We had a daughter. I have a 23-year-old daughter, Shayna, who's the light of my life. She's gorgeous. She's awesome. But I stayed in that relationship for 21 years. And it was a regular verbal abuse. It was a regular physical abuse. And I made up stories and lied to people at work. And a lot of people think, well, there's no way you could do that, Steve. You're too confident, and you're too this, and you're too that. And that's not true. You get in a situation, and when you have low self-esteem to begin with from your childhood, it carries, and you end up blaming yourself. Oh, there's something I'm doing. I did it wrong. Just like you hear the stories of women, same thing with a guy. I did something wrong. I was the bad guy. I should never have said this. I should have never done that. And really all I did in my 21-year marriage is I went to work, and I covered all the bills, and took care of the house and the yard, and made sure the kids went to college, and I did everything that I was supposed to do, and all the while I was telling myself I was doing something wrong. And then it kind of dawned on me one day that I wasn't. I'd gone to 7 psychologists for marriage counseling. My wife went one time to one meeting, and they talked about her childhood, and she quit. She never went back. So I kept going, trying to fix me. And every one of the 7 psychologists said the same story. They said, sometimes, Steve, you just got to give up. Sometimes you're not the bad guy. Sometimes it's the other person. And finally, I was working in Chicago, and we had a house in Wisconsin, and I was sitting there alone watching hockey, and it dawned on me that I am happier. So I did. I asked for divorce, and got out of that situation. My daughters were grown at that point. My stepdaughter she was already out of college and on her own. She'd gone to a private school, private college, and got her degrees. And my younger daughter was heading to college at that time. So my kids were grown. So I ended the relationship, and that wasn't pretty. And then about that time, Brenda Brock appeared in my life. I get a little emotional. At first, we didn't get along. We struggled. We were very like-minded, and we bumped heads. But if ever, I'm going to try to shorten the story a little bit, we realized we were very similar, and we started falling in love, and she was going through a rough marriage and getting divorced. I was already well into my divorce plans. Excuse me. I was already probably divorced when we started to see each other and date, and then she introduced me to the girls, and I started going to church with her, started to go to St. John's, which I hadn't done in my adult life at all. So that was new to me, figuring out what to do. And everybody was very welcoming and very kind. And give me just a second. And I really appreciate that, because as much as my marriage was bad, my first marriage, you feel like a failure when you get divorced. Even if it was for the best for everybody, you feel like a failure. You kind of feel like, man, I messed this up. It shouldn't have ended. I could have fixed it. I think Brenda felt the same thing with her marriage ending. But Brenda and her girls accepted me, and St. John's accepted me, and Brenda's family accepted me, and I kind of gave up my life and jumped into hers. I always bought the house. I paid for the cars. I bought everything in my life. And I kind of, when you say leap of faith, I kind of leapt into the Brock household. I don't pay for the house. I help out. I pay for my cars, and I pay for other stuff, and I pay my spousal support to my ex-wife. But it was a leap to jump into her life and give up all the things that I had done in the past. But Brenda's going to hate me for saying this. Last summer we kind of struggled in our marriage, and it wasn't her fault. She's done everything right since we met. I mean, she's done everything great. But I didn't know how to be loved. I didn't know how to accept it, and how that anybody could love me. I was like, no way. We've since gotten through that because of her patience, and we're doing great right now. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with her being faith-based and being a regular member at St. John's, and the support that she gets from the congregation. And I know that I've appreciated it. And I've started to believe, there's Jesus Christ, and and God exists. And if you'd asked me 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 8 years ago, I'd have probably said, no way, I don't believe. So a lot of good has happened in my life, and I think St. John's has been a part of that, because Brenda's been a part of St. John's, and now I am. We get a lot of support, a lot of love and acceptance, and I think everybody that goes there does. It's a great church, great congregation, and I can't say enough about how much they've accepted me as well. So that's my story. It's been a journey, and I'm at a point in my life I'm very happy. I think that Brenda's happy. I think the girls are happy. We all get along good. Even Mike, her ex-husband, we get along great. He comes over for the 4th of July party, and we go to volleyball together. So I think it all worked out, and it's been my pleasure to share my story with you.